Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 20th, 2018. Time for another show. It's time for the last show of the week for which my children will not be present in the background. Although it is possible they may sleep late tomorrow, so we might get a quiet start. It is Thursday, so we'll have Greg Dworkin joining us a little bit later on. That is, if his name still is Greg Dworkin. I hesitated there for a moment. You thought I was stumbling on pronunciation or even forgot who he was. No, I am just not certain that he goes by the name Greg Dworkin any longer. I don't know. You can't tell anything these days. I just want everybody to know that's exactly how it was supposed to go. That's how it reads on this teleprompter, which I don't use. And, all right. Well, anyway, I'm adopting the Donald Trump tactic of insisting that I absolutely positively meant exactly what I stumbled into saying. And it's working for me so far. All right, lots to round up today. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Now watch this one. Ready? Will Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, own the libs by saying Merry Christmas? If he's reading this tweet out loud, which I'm not, over the radio, he just did. Ha ha, I've been fooled into doing it. Good morning. Thank you, Bill, for pulling that stunt on us. Yes, I'm not afraid to say Merry Christmas. Thank God we can say Merry Christmas again. I think it should get worse and worse. The pronunciation, I should just turn it up a notch. All right, what's happening today? Well, let's see. We withdrew from Syria by tweet yesterday, and North Korea is saying this is fantastic news. North Korea says it won't denuclearize. So that sucks, because I thought that they would. I was told that they were going to do it, and it turns out that they're not going to. So I guess he's going to have to give back that Nobel Peace Prize. North Korea says it won't denuclearize unless the U.S. removes its troops and nuclear umbrella from South Korea and Japan. And Trump may very well agree to do that. I don't know. Let's see. North Korea also accused the U.S. and Trump of misleading the world about what was agreed to at the Singapore talks last summer. That was obvious. We already knew that. Thank you, though. I guess. Do I take the confirmation of the North Koreans? I don't think I should, but I think I had confirmed it already. Yeah, he was misleading the world about what was agreed to at Singapore. Sure, of course. As it happens, the Koreans have discovered this as well. And, okay. I don't know. I guess I'm cool with it. On the whole, in Syria, I don't know what to tell you. On the whole, I guess I prefer that there not be American troops anywhere under Trump's command. It's an embarrassment, and it's a leverage point against the United States. I think I'd prefer that they not be in Syria under Trump's command, not so much because there's either nothing to do there or I don't want to have a confrontation with Putin anywhere, for one thing, if we can help it. But for another thing, where Trump is in command and it can be made to look like an embarrassment for the United States, no matter what Trump concludes or whatever he decides he wants to do in response to what Putin's provocations are. I worry that there's extra incentive there for Putin to provoke, knowing that almost nothing on the board anywhere that Trump can do will shield him from criticism or the United States from scorn. So I guess on the whole, I'm fine with it. I have no praise for Trump over the withdrawal, not the least of the reasons being, I guess, is that I don't know. I'm not certain what our policy ought to be there anyway. So I guess if I'm not sure, then I'd rather not see troops there. I guess that's really it. I don't know that he delivered anything terrific in doing this. It's a little bit weird in the way he did it, tweeting the withdrawal of troops, etc. Especially after years and years of, well, if we ever announce the withdrawal of American troops like that, we're putting them in danger, or it's a terrible signal to the world. All of that coming from Republicans and not a few Democrats echoing that as well. And then, of course, you go and do that, and I don't know, maybe that's not smart. I have no real analysis of it for you. I'm not a foreign policy expert by any means, and I'm certainly not a military policy expert, and I couldn't tell you what the hell's going on in Syria, and I don't know if anybody really can. So, but I'm told this morning that I guess it's ideologically inconsistent for me to do anything but applaud Trump for doing this. This, according to the political experts, Jonathan Allen, who tells me, apparently, I saw Greg retweeting this one too, that attention confident Democrats, he says, real Donald Trump, that's his actual Twitter handle, I don't know if you know that, just banned bump stocks. We talked about that one yesterday. Did he? Didn't he? I don't know. Maybe. We'll see what happens. Delivered criminal justice reform. We didn't talk about that. A bill was passed yesterday, I think. I don't even know. And I don't know what's in it. I don't know if it's a good one or not. Too much other crap going on to actually pay attention to substantive legislation. That's sad. But I understand that they think they came together. They want to give the impression that they came together in bipartisan fashion to pass much-needed sweeping criminal justice reform. I have a feeling that it was considerably less sweeping than people who entered into the process thought they were going to get, or wanted to get anyway. The third thing announced a withdrawal from Syria, and then I was told by the powers that be that these are policies popular with your voters, my voters, and independents. They happened in the span of a week, and I am supposed to take away from that, I guess, that crime is cool now, and everything is going to be A-okay, and how I learned to stop worrying and love Trump. I guess he's delivered on my top priorities, which I believe I told you were not priorities for me in any real sense, although having criminal justice reform would be a nice priority, although I don't know that I would put it at the top of my list. Many people I know and respect would, so I don't know. I guess I'll have to turn to them for their analysis whenever it gets published, but it being the holidays, it may take some time for them to make those publications, or for those publications to make their way to me. Anyway, bump stocks, I don't know what to tell you. It's a Trump administration policy. I don't think it happens. So, you know, we banned bump stocks. I guess he didn't ban bump stocks. It might not come out that way. Again, starting from the very beginning, the paperwork, did it get signed? I don't know. I haven't seen it. Maybe reporters have. Maybe they haven't. They're all going on the assumption that it exists. It was signed by a guy who might not be, I would tell you isn't, the acting attorney general. He may have signed it. He may not have signed it. He might be the acting attorney general. He might not be. He might have exceeded his authority. He might not have. They might be able to ban bump stocks. They might not. We'll see what courts have to say about various things. We'll see whether it's worth the paper it's written on once everybody realizes the underlying problem here is semi-automatic weapons and we're never going to deal with those. Forget the 3D printability of bump stocks. I don't think that's going to be a hugely popular thing to do. Fact that you can build one out of wood or scrap metal probably isn't going to help very much. And of course, have to remind you once again, the fact that you don't actually need one at all to bump fire a semi-automatic weapon doesn't help either. It's not worthless, by the way. I mean, in case anybody didn't get this the first 15 times we talked about bump stocks, and it's not your fault that you didn't get it. It's my fault. Or maybe you didn't get it. Or you didn't not get it. I just keep saying it over and over again. It's an important point to me, but it's not worthless to have a bump stock. It makes it a lot easier to aim. That's really about it. And as I understand things, that's of some importance to gun owners and gun enthusiasts to be able to make sure that the bullets go more or less approximately where you wanted them to. Not that they're doing a great job with that. It starts out as a top priority, but it fades in the joy of shooting, apparently, because we lose track of a lot of these bullets. Sometimes right from the get-go, sometimes a little bit later on. Can't be too much later on. Bullets travel very fast. But bump stock makes it a lot easier for you to aim at the same time as you manipulate the gun to fire repeatedly. Without the bump stock, you can still do that and spray bullets in a general direction. But then again, That's one of the reasons that we've invented guns that basically spray bullets. You know what? The aiming, it's hard. The people move. You shake your hands a little bit. Maybe you cough, or, when it comes to real target shooting, you breathe while you're squeezing the trigger. Causes a lot of problems. Sometimes you don't blow up the tannerite target at your gender reveal party on the first shot. So spray it with bullets, and then it really doesn't matter how good your aim is at all. And I have a feeling we're going to be back on this subject again very quickly. But we'll have to wait 90 days for the ban to be implemented if it makes it all the way through the various challenges, after which some period of time, how long, I don't know, till we can definitively say that all of these unregulated, unregistered, and otherwise unmonitorable pieces of plastic are gone from the market, which is to say we will never see them gone. Anyway, we'll turn over the rest of the show. Here, take it, Greg. You can have it. I'm sick of it as it is. Good morning. How are you?
Well, you don't want to talk about more gun grabbing?
They're not guns, man.
That's not what they're saying.
No, that's true.
They are.
Yes. No. Who? Which ones?
Them.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's the NRA who's been kind of mumbly about it. The Gun Owners of America are that's an actual organization, not just generally speaking, people who own guns in America, taking the lead and complaining about this one. Mm-hmm. But the NRA won't stay silent for very long. They're trying to figure out the lighting on Dana Loesch's video complaining about it.
Well, yeah. Perhaps, and again, I guess this gets to part of Jonathan Allen's a little odd story that you were talking about. Jonathan Allen put together a short list, like three things or so. Yes. Syria, which is the big story today, of course. The bump stocks and criminal justice reform, which of the three of them is the one that's different than the other two. And almost made it sound like a Trump pivot. Look, here he is playing not just to his base, but to the rest of the country. That will probably go well.
Yes.
Democrats should not be overconfident about whatever, yada, yada, this and that, and wave your hands.
Don't worry. We got the overconfidence thing covered.
I think so, just like we did in November past when we won this election, thinking we were going to win this election. But, the point is really that bump stocks are not high on the list of things that people care about. We like to have it done. Something is better than nothing. But just to put this in perspective, AP came out yesterday with their top 10 stories of 2018. And the top story, of course, is what happened in Parkland. Mm. And what the Parkland folks want and what the rest of us want is way, way beyond bump stocks. And doing this one thing on bump stocks, which is rewriting the Federal Register to, make it different, make the law different, isn't the same thing as, comprehensive change.
No.
And the demise of the NRA, given that it's a Russian cutout. Those are far more important stories than the bump stock one. Syria is a hugely important story, but not the way Jonathan Allen makes it sound. If you look at polls, most people really don't care about being in Syria, don't want to be in Syria. But pulling out precipitously, endangering our allies, the Kurds, getting everybody mad at you, both Republican and Democratic, plus all of our allies telling you you're an idiot. And by the way, you didn't even consult with your Department of Defense or your Department of State before you did this, let alone the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is not a recipe for winning the hearts and minds of voters. It's one thing to not be keen on, military adventures around the world, and it's quite another to watch incredible incompetence seen in real time. I mean, it's gotten to the point. Let me just give you some examples of that. Let's see. We have the Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria startles aides and allies. That's in the Washington Post. And the officials reiterated that the Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, that's the Kurds, remain valued American allies who would not be deserted, except, of course, they've just been completely deserted, and they say that they just feel deserted.
Oh.
Josh Rogan, hardly anybody's favorite liberal, writes, Trump didn't bother to invite Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dunford to the Syria meeting and kept him in the dark until after the decision was made. David Frum writes, I've listened to a lot of explanations about how those 2,000 troops in Syria prove that Trump cannot be beholden to Russia in any way. Of course, Vladimir Putin loves it. That was the report this morning. And just to give you an idea of how bad this is going from a politics and PR point of view, Talking Points Memo had a tweet this morning. Fox and Friends host calls Trump's Syria withdrawal stunning and irresponsible. So when you've lost Fox and Friends, you know things are not going all that well.
Yes. Careful, confident Fox viewers. Something. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what to tell you about it. I guess.
Now, criminal justice reform is a little different because
He didn't do
it actually was a bipartisan thing. This is something that the administration worked on and spent some time trying to do, and then apparently was able to pull off, at least as far as the Senate goes. And so they should take some credit for that. Fine, you get your credit. Now let's get back to the rest of reality. So I don't see any of these things changing anybody's mind. This is not going to broaden Trump's base. It's not going to change the fact that the Mueller and the other 17 investigations going on are going to be in the news constantly, let alone coming indictments. And we know there are going to be more indictments. I mean, that's not a prediction. That's just let's just note what's going to happen here. And Trump's floundering on Syria. The criminal justice reform, done over with. What do you want to talk about today? What have you done for me lately? And the bump stocks, which is not going to be moving Trump stocks anyway, up or down, have nothing to do with how the populace is going to look at this particular presidency and what happens. So it's a dumb article to begin with. And then the tweet that said Democrats ought to not be overconfident about this is even dumber. Because what is this going to do? Win over 50% of the public who strongly disapproves of Trump? I don't think so.
Yeah. No. No. I was going to say yes.
Yeah. Well, good you didn't.
Jonathan Allen almost got me. All right.
Almost got you. Just like Bill in Portland, Maine, always get you. Now, here's some interesting questions about the Syria debacle.
How?
Do you think it was because Putin told him to? I mean, there are some things that are happening on the Russia front that Trump is doing.
Yeah.
But this may, Putin is the one who's going to benefit among others.
Right.
Who's happy about it. Probably the more direct thing that benefits Putin and people around him are the lifting of sanctions.
Yes, that's happening.
Including on, as Reuters puts it, the U.S. Treasury said it will lift sanctions on the core empire of Russian businessman Oleg Deripaska, including aluminum giant Rusal and its parent EN Plus. It's like is that a secret Enron? EN Plus?
Yeah.
Plus it's EN and then a plus sign. Watering down the toughest penalties imposed since Moscow's 2014 annexation of Crimea.
Okay.
So you have Oleg Deripaska and sanctions in the news. That makes you think, oh, Russia, because that's what you do, right? And the other side of the coin is that Trump trying to get Manafort off the hook because Deripaska is the one who Manafort owes all that money to.
Yeah.
Backfire because if Manafort no longer fears a polonium sandwich, maybe he'll sing like a canary.
Maybe.
Anyway, but that's the Russia side of it.
Yeah.
Fact of the matter is that Trump made this precipitous and rather abrupt Syria change policy by tweet thing after talking to Erdogan.
Oh, yeah.
Putin. So he was on the phone with Erdogan and then did this.
Right away?
After talking to Erdogan. So
he's a doer.
What does Erdogan have on him in regard to Khashoggi and other things?
Oh, right. Well, there is that weird dynamic by which people are pretty convinced, and I don't know, that doing a favor for Erdogan in Turkey allows him to lower the pressure on Saudi Arabia to do something. I don't know what, because of the Khashoggi murder. That seems tenuous to me. Like, I don't know that Turkey is or isn't going to press the issue based on what the United States does. I don't know if there's any favors we could do that. I think they're enjoying having leverage over Saudi Arabia, and they're going to do it no matter what we do.
Well, Turkey wants to eradicate the Kurds.
Yeah, that's another problem for the Kurds. The Kurds were not surprised.
I mean, it's clear what Turkey
wants.
We did.
Yes, mayo and lettuce and tomato.
Yeah,
but other than that, I couldn't.
Bacon. But no, I mean, it's pretty clear.
Is it?
What Turkey wants, and that is to have free reign to take that part of Syria. I mean, Syria is getting divided up now between Russia, Iran, and Turkey. And remember that Trump wanted to pull out of the Iranian nuclear deal because it was too favorable to Iran. So what does he do? He gives them a third of Syria and says, take it.
All right. Well, maybe they will. I don't know I don't know whether Turkey has actual territorial designs on Syrian land so much as it, like you said,
so much as the people who live there.
Yeah, wants to eradicate the Kurds, and to the extent that they escape
We'd like it to be a
Syrian
desert,
jurisdiction.
And let's get rid of the people that are there, because I don't want you coming in here and agitating for Kurdish autonomy.
Right.
And by the way, where's that cleric we asked you for?
It's coming right up, sir. Hold on. Takes a while. Amazon is a two-month delivery. It's a long.
Yeah, that's the thing. I ordered it one click. I expect it here tomorrow. I'm a Prime member. Delivered by drone, would you?
Well, we might. We could possibly do that. I don't think it's out of the question where he is in his compound in Pennsylvania. I think you could probably do it with minimal collateral damage.
So, but that all of that is hanging over this. I mean, it's just it's bad. It's a bad look. It's probably a bad policy. Mm-hmm. One might wish to get out of Syria, as Jonathan Allen was pointing out, and still not want to do it this way. And by owning this, by saying we're doing this because ISIS is defeated, which is what Trump tweeted before he said, but you have to continue to fight ISIS. But this is like the wall shutdown.
Yeah.
Where Trump says, okay, you want me to own it? I'll own the shutdown. I'll take responsibility.
Yeah, briefly.
And everybody else in Washington is saying, oh, my God, he just said that. And now Trump is saying ISIS is finished. If there's any other thing that happens anywhere in the world, France or otherwise, I own this because I just told you that ISIS was defeated.
I guess so. I'm curious what who they'll blame any subsequent terrorist attacks
Obama
on.
Or Clinton.
Well, I mean,
that's easy.
That could be the answer to my question,
point, really.
But I really meant who as the perpetrator. But they might just say Obama actually planted the bomb. That's possible for them to say. And I don't know what the odds of a terrorist attack, non-domestic in its origin here in the United States is. Although I did see Newt Gingrich laying the groundwork for insisting that what I think probably the next horrible thing that happens. He was laying the groundwork for blaming it on MS-13. I think they may get a promotion to terrorist organization.
Did he say MS-13 or MSNBC? I wasn't sure.
It was on MSNBC, but it was rated PG-13 when he did it. But yeah, he's like laid his stupid Newt Gingrich marker out there saying that because liberals are blocking the construction of the wall, something horrible is going to happen in the next horrific
steel slats.
crime.
It's not a wall anymore. It's steel slats.
Oh yes, right. Designer steel slats.
Right.
And
I don't remember who said this. Liam Donovan said, a conservative writer, said steel slats sounds like one of those 80s grunge bands.
Right, yeah.
Like before they went commercial,
Yeah, STYL. Yeah. Anyhow, yeah, he says the next horrific crime committed in the United States will probably be a MS-13 thing, which is his way of saying I'm going to blame it on MS-13, and then you'll really want the wall built. But I'm not.
Well, but here's the problem: the next crime that's going to committed in the U.S. that's going to capture everybody's attention, unlikely, for Trump, but alas for us, is this piece here in the Daily Beast The third Dylan Roof fan arrested in past week, the white supremacist murderer has inspired people across the country to take up his cause. That's a story in the Daily Beast.
Inspired.
So real stuff happens while Trump plays at being president, and it all comes together in a way that doesn't necessarily help him politically, Jonathan Allen.
No. Nor does it help Jonathan Allen.
Nor does it help the country.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a weird little direction for him to take, but doesn't really matter a great deal. I don't think anybody else is latching onto that one.
Well, but the fact of the matter is that when you go and you do something with enormous, and here's the other way to look at it. Brendan Nyhan, political scientist, says, look at the wall and the caravan, and that is typical peak Trump. Mm-hmm. You create a crisis that doesn't exist, and then you pretend to solve the crisis, but at some cost, and then you take credit for solving the crisis.
Yes.
You know, we tightened up everything, and the caravan never made it in. You see how good a job we did?
Is that
for
the
this non-existent
now?
Threat that we took care of? That was one of his tweets.
I'm curious.
But that doesn't work in Syria. You can't undo this. You can't just go back and say, okay, I'm going to undo it and take credit for it. That's not how Syria works. That's not how international policy works. And, you know, we get to see that with a completely incompetent president who is everything we said he was going to be before he was elected, and that's bad for the country.
Yeah, well, he listed a number of bad things that he was going to do, and now he, I guess, is doing them. We always figured that he would just say the wall is built, just say ISIS has been defeated, just say, I don't know what else, that he could just fake like that. But he's beginning to do it, and I don't know. And I get warned, watch out, overconfident Democrats. I've never met an overconfident Democrat in my life.
Right, it's not in our DNA. It's
yeah. So, okay, well, all right, we'll be back in 2 minutes to round up further developments in his imaginary world after this. Hi, everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
Then there was Toledo, Ohio.
Well, you know what? Hold on, let me welcome us back here. Hi, I'm here. Welcome me. I welcome you too, Greg. We're back with more of the Kagro in the Morning Show. We're getting carried away with figuring out this third Dylan Roof fan. I'm trying to think of. Thankfully, I think we've done a pretty good job not talking very much about the names of the other nuts, but I guess maybe because they didn't get to pull off their attacks, we don't know who they are. So we're up to 3.
Yeah.
This third
a 20-year-old who was arrested in Lake Forest Park, Washington. That's Washington State.
Yeah.
And he's a member of a Pacific Northwest separatist movement, and who also pledged allegiance to the KKK and made explicit threats to murder Jewish people.
Uh-huh.
And one of the threats involved Dylan Roof. Oh. And he's the third white person recently arrested over threats mentioning Roof. Earlier this week, FBI agents arrested a 20-something Toledo, Ohio couple who allegedly planned a mass shooting. And one of the pair, the woman, allegedly sent letters in Nazi literature to Roof in prison. She is one of only 4 people the mass murderer is known to have corresponded with while he sits on death row.
Okay. And he's got time for more, ladies.
Right?
If you're interested.
Independent of the Roof-inspired couple, who I guess are being counted as one, a different Toledo, Ohio man was arrested for allegedly planning a synagogue shooting.
What's the matter with Toledo?
So those are the 3. So Toledo, Ohio has an issue. Pacific Northwest has an issue. And that's what they're referring to. Yeah. So, there are threats out there. And white supremacist threats are quite real.
Okay. I thought when you said, you phrased it as Pacific Northwest white he says he's white supremacist who also pledged allegiance. That's a new one. Pledge allegiance to the Ku Klux Klan of the United States of America. And then you said a separatist, Pacific Northwest separatist. I thought there was, I had no idea.
Separately.
Like that the Pacific Northwest wants to secede or something. Or, I mean, it doesn't, but the people there. That's a possibility. I could see like that Northwestern corner, but not
people
the
like
coastal
J.J.
part.
McNabb and Dave Newart follow these things, so they probably know exactly which group he was a member of. Or if you're a true separatist, does that mean you're Groucho Marx and you won't be a member of any club that would have you because then you have to separate? I don't know. But the threat of somebody taking this stuff seriously, the copycat murders, the people, we know this from Sandy Hook, people who want to see if they can up the total, and get one more than the lasts and get a prize and up your level or whatever it is that you're thinking. It's horrible but real, and so it's worthwhile paying attention to this.
Well, good on the locals for making the catch early.
Yep. Now, while all this is going on,
yes,
we still have legal issues involved with Donald Trump. We got the Trump Foundation that happened to have to dissolve. Harold Pollack wrote a very lovely tweet storm I'm going to read to you.
Oh, Harold.
About that. I like Harold.
Okay.
Harold is like one of the nicest guys on the internet.
I like Pollack. So
he says, the New York Attorney General suggests that the Trump Foundation is a comprehensive fraud. I fully believe this, but I am also truly puzzled.
Oh. So we can straighten things out for you, Harold.
Yeah, but he gives links with all of this. Trump Foundation to close after lawsuit. He says, I'm not surprised that the foundation is riddled with self-dealing, hidden favoritism, and tax scams. A story from the Washington Post, he cites Trump used $258,000 from his charity to settle legal problems. Harold says, I'm not surprised the foundation's main purpose, other than these scams, is to promote Trump himself. And then this is the portrait of Donald Trump that his charity bought for $20,000.
Yes.
The portrait's been seized on by Democrats as evidence Trump has been misusing his charity's money. Of course, some of the great work by David Fahrenthold. Remember the one of him as a golfer, showing him about 300 pounds slimmer than he actually is? Remember that one?
Well, all of the, I think, I'm not sure. I remember one
Some
where
of
he
them
was
are just
in a
his face.
sweater.
You don't get to see his belly,
Okay.
or his 50-foot-long tie.
Yeah, I don't know which one had the golf clubs in it. I was told one of them had
it wasn't golf clubs. It was a golfing outfit. It was like the white sweater.
Ah, yeah. That one.
Standing with 1 foot looking into the distance, 1 foot on a chair looking into the but
right.
it made him look like he was like 155 pounds.
Yeah, well, he is.
So he really liked that one.
Yeah, okay, I remember that one. That's the one with the sweater. I recall that one.
Yeah. None of this is surprising given who we are dealing with. I'm not surprised to see a billionaire use this foundation for unethical financial hijinks and to evade various niceties of estate taxation and corporate governments. And it links to that one, how the IRS could punish Trump and his foundation. Then he says, here's what does surprise me. This is where it gets interesting. There are literally no good works performed or even the president's obsessions or pet causes performed on even the president's obsessions or pet causes pursued by this foundation at all. And then there's a Forbes piece here, how Donald Trump shifted kids' cancer charity money into his business. Now, the thing is, Harold, as a researcher, and this, I am certainly familiar with this world. Let me just put it that way. We researchers do various fundraisers involving the top 0.01%. Some are saints. Some are jerks. Some are devotees of Gwyneth Paltrow's latest potion. Some are moved by world hunger. Others want their name on the dorm where they met their bae or whatever. And then cites news from Yale, $150 million gift to establish first of its kind campus center at Yale, the Stephen A. Schwartzman Center. You always want your name on something, right? And Harold says every one of them has a genuine passion for something, even if that something seems pretty silly or frivolous to us. Maybe they're passionate about liver cancer because their wonderful nanny suffered from it. Maybe they want to give $50 million to the Pollack Cat Leukemia Center. President Trump doesn't show any of that, any genuine interest in anything outside himself. Trump's tone-deaf billionaire comportment weirdly reminds me of Rod Blagojevich.
Wow.
Old-style machine politics weren't always pretty, but there were niceties and rules. You didn't shake down the children's hospital for campaign cash. That's what the concrete contractor was for. The children's hospital is why you did it. It's what you genuinely felt good about, bragged about to the grandkids. Same deal for sharp-elbowed billionaires. Their philanthropy generally matters to them. It's how many wish to be remembered. Many of them wish to be remembered after they're gone. Sure, you might use your foundation to skirt a few rules about estate taxes, corporate governance. You know, hey, listen, maybe there's a few people buried in the concrete, you know, whatever happened to Jimmy Hoffa. But it's a real thing. You're proud of it. I just added that Jimmy Hoffa thing. That wasn't Harold. I told you he's nice. You enjoy it. You don't use it to pay your kids $7 Boy Scout dues or make your foundation an embarrassing joke. And that's true. Donald took $7 out of his charity to pay for his son's Boy Scout dues.
Yes.
That actually happened.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that.
You know that, but
yeah,
you know,
yeah. I imagine he thought Boy Scouts is a nonprofit organization, so that's a legit thing. It's a charity,
well,
same
he
thing.
used his foundation as a checkbook and a piggy bank for him. And here's an example. And he's so cheap he wouldn't even pay the $7 because his kids aren't worth it, you know, to him, because it's all about him. So Harold says, you support whatever moves you, even if they're your own eccentric or pet cause. That's part of what's so fun about that first billion.
Okay.
Right? And he cites a piece here. Wilford Brimley really wanted to keep cockfighting legal.
He did. I did not know that about him, but it's the right thing to do and a tasty way to do it.
It's the right thing to do. You know, so, but everybody's got this thing that they really care about. So Harold points out correctly,
hell, yes,
the president doesn't do any of that. For all of his money, for all of his power, supermodel romances, he's not somebody I envy for a single second. He seems spiritually empty in some profound and sad way. What does it profit a man to win the whole world if he never locates his own soul?
Well, that's a question for smarter people than Donald Trump. My soul, what do I care?
So
who cares?
That anybody can take a crack at it. You know, the whole idea here, though, is, I mean, Harold's absolutely right. This is a guy who cares about nothing except himself.
Right.
And he won't even, you know, do the old style thing of getting your name on some charity, or library or children's hospital or something, so that everybody else could ignore the ill-gotten way you got your gains and just remember you for doing that one good work. That's typically how it works.
Yes.
And Trump is so far out of that loop because he cares about nothing, and the only thing he cares about is himself. So why would he ever give any money to anything else but himself?
His mind just doesn't work that way. I believe he named the carousel in Central Park, the pavilion, after himself. I think or what was it, the ice skating rink? He renovated one of these things, and that he named after himself. Everything else he names after Ivanka, which is weird, but he doesn't. He would argue with that. What do you mean I don't name him? Everything is named after me. The Trump Tower, who's it named after if it's not me? And
my stuff.
Yeah,
I don't name
stuff
other
is
people's
mine.
stuff after me. I only name my stuff.
Right.
After me.
And why would I do that? I feel so
and
good.
Why would I do that?
The
Is
stupid,
exactly right.
crusty
why
old
would I
library
do that? Is the operative point there?
Yes.
To him, why would I do that?
He doesn't value those things. A stupid library. It smells funny in there. This is a beautiful, fantastic, world-class luxury
it's
hotel.
like with gold books. They don't smell.
Yeah, right.
You don't have to worry about them rotting over time. You know,
Right.
It's got everything.
Yeah. So
I can't read them, but who cares? I don't read them.
Not of interest.
Why would you want to read them? It's not my problem.
Right. My name is on everything, and it's on all the good things. And all the other stuff where there's dirt or people, no. I don't have my name on those.
Mm.
So, yeah, he'll be unconvinced by that. Harold's right. If I may call you Harold, Professor.
Everybody calls him Harold.
All right, good. Right. Well, okay. It's okay. He's right. What about Wilford Brimley, though, and the cockfighting?
Yeah, well, I'll leave that for you. But I've noticed Rebecca Vallis tweets this morning breaking, after failing to gut food stamps in the Farm Bill, Trump has announced he plans to sidestep Congress and unilaterally slash the program by fiat days before Christmas. A proposed rule issued today by the Trump administration would significantly weaken the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP, by making it even harder for unemployed and underemployed workers to access food assistance under the guise of harsher work requirements. The rule could jeopardize food assistance for some 755,000 Americans struggling to find stable work. It would also undermine states' ability to respond to economic downturns and help distressed communities with few jobs. That would be rural communities. That would be his base, in other words.
Right.
So Trump made no secret of his desire to see food assistance dismantled in the Farm Bill. He vocally backed the House GOP plan. We've done that. The plan was so odious and cruel. It was dead on arrival in the Senate. But Trump doesn't give up when he can't get his cruel agenda through. So now he's using the same playbook to unilaterally take food out of the mouths of hundreds of thousands of struggling workers and families. And we're talking about a program that provides $1.40 per person per meal.
Yeah, but that's like 5 Boy Scout dues.
Right. So I'll give you that story. But, one of my doctor friends just tweeted that out and sent it to me. Mm-hmm. And, this is just bad.
I'll look.
Because it's Christmas, after all.
Yeah. Imagine if there was a work requirement for Donald Trump's food. That would be maybe a good idea. It says if you want those...
Yeah, for banning hamburgers.
You can press the Diet Coke button all you want, but you have to walk a mile on a treadmill.
Donald, hamburgers come from Syria. You got to do something.
I wonder if you would believe that.
I don't know.
There's no reason you couldn't convince him that they come from Syria.
Exactly. Why not? There's a city named Hamburg. It's in Syria.
Yeah, it's full of Syrians. He could believe that.
Right, I suppose. The thing I'll leave you with, though, because I think it's just so well done, is a Matt Fuller piece. Matt Fuller follows Congress.
Okay.
And on the retirement of Paul Ryan.
Yes.
He wrote a piece called, "And What Can You Say About Paul Ryan?" How much time do you have?
An hour and 46 minutes.
Cool. Here's why I love
the
Huffington Post,
minutes.
says
Yes.
Matt Fuller. We get to tell the truth about Paul Ryan. We didn't have to pretend he was a serious thinker or a tragic figure. We called him what he is, a monumental partisan, and we got to do it for 3,200 words. Please read and share. So I am.
Cool. Okay.
And maybe you could do that in the second part of the show. It's pretty
Zero
long.
ink
What I do
costs.
want to touch with before I go, and I'm not sure where Joan wound up on this yesterday, is the idea of a government shutdown before Christmas.
Yes.
Or whether it will or will not happen. The Senate passed a CR last night.
Yeah.
The House could pass a CR. I'm glad I asked you about the 218 rule because some people have gone and they're not there. But the House Freedom Caucus says, we're not going to pass this unless you give us a wall and also, 90 other things that are completely onerous.
Okay.
And Nancy Pelosi is counting votes because the way for the CR to pass in the House might well be with Democratic votes. In other words, breaking the non-existent Hastert rule.
Yes. It won't bother, what's his name? That guy, the ex-speaker. I forgot his name already. Paul Ryan. It won't bother him any.
I thought you meant Dennis Hastert. It won't bother him either.
Oh, well, it won't bother him either. He won't hear about it. Doesn't get through into... is he in prison or is he out? I think he's
don't know.
out.
I can
He's
tell. It's
in a
like John
wheelchair.
Rowland in Connecticut. I can never tell whether he's in or out of prison.
Okay. Well...
I have to look it up each time because I can't remember.
Yeah. Like, is Abe Vigoda dead? And is Hastert in prison? Yeah. It's surprising, but the answer is no. All right. Well, I've stumped everybody. I'll read the Matt Fuller
is it going to
thing.
pass? Is
it going to pass?
Nancy Pelosi can get enough votes to make it pass, but what happens then?
Nothing.
I mean, I would love to see that happen and finally have Paul Ryan in his last act for the one time pass something with Democratic votes and shrug his shoulders and say, oh, well, you only live once.
Nothing matters. I'm going back.
Right.
Is he going back to Wisconsin or is he sticking around? I don't know what his plans are next. They very rarely leave Washington.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back to Janesville. Why not?
Could. The plant's closed, but
you could tend bar.
Yeah, sure. I could try that. the other question I had, I guess I'll have to look it up, actually. The big crime, the criminal justice reform bill you mentioned, that also passed in the Senate. Has that been passed in the House? Because I don't know where they're going to...
I mean, I guess they expect it to.
I guess by voice vote, because if they don't, then and the House doesn't pass it, then President Trump hasn't delivered squat, because that bill dies when the House never comes back and the new Congress is sworn in and they have to start all over again.
Right. So those are the things we'll leave hanging there for you, but those are among today's big stories.
Okay.
But I just love any retrospective on Paul Ryan, because he was a fake and a phony and a fraud, and anything that reveals that, I am for.
Okay, I'm for it too, and we can turn to the Huffington Post now, the Huff Post.
The HuffPost, as they call it.
Well, they call it that
Millhiser
officially
says,
now.
as somebody who also writes for a publication that gets to tell the truth about Paul Ryan, I will never stop being astounded at how so many journalists with massive platforms get taken in by such an obvious con man. And Matt Fuller retweeted that and said, Ian has written about Paul Ryan's con for years, and you should read his stuff.
Okay. Now?
If you want to.
Okay.
And he has
Sounded like you wanted
Matt
me to
Fuller is pushing this. This is his big story for the year.
I'll take it.
He also tweeted, if you hate Paul Ryan, you'll like
do.
this piece.
I
If you
will.
like Paul Ryan, I think you'll hate this piece.
Oh.
If you are neutral on Paul Ryan, LOL, what, huh, how?
But can I interview you in your diner?
Exactly right. So I'll leave you with that. I think it's a piece well worth looking at.
Okay.
Alrighty. And then he hasn't stopped. He keeps going.
Does he?
Jim Newell retweets another Matt Fuller piece and says, I'm
this?
actually laughing at how consistently merciless this is.
Okay.
Matt Fuller tweets, Paul Ryan delivered 2 speeches in the Great Hall of the Library of Congress, one near the start of his speakership in December 2015 and one at the end today. He didn't live up to the room. He wasn't even close.
All right. People are enjoying it. We should just read the tweets about it.
The tweets are great. I already read you the tweets. Now you can go read the story. All right. Take care. And let's see. Are you on Christmas Eve on Monday? What's your schedule for next week?
I don't know. I think I'll probably be away from the home base from which it would be possible to actually broadcast live. So I'm guessing we're going to say no to that.
Okay.
And,
well, heads
sad.
up. So
Yes.
For those of you who didn't know, there might be a classic Kagro in the morning on Monday.
Yes. You want to go to the movies? We could go and do a podcast about that.
Yeah, and we'll go and have Chinese food.
Okay. Terrific.
Because that's the only thing that's open.
Yeah, that used to be true. Now, more things are open.
Now it's
these
mostly
days.
true.
Yeah, and by the way, those
it's
places that are manned are very often kept open. Your essential services, like, I want a hamburger from Five Guys. What am I going to do? Being kept open largely by Middle Eastern refugees. Just wanted you to know that, because they work on Christmas. No skin off their nose.
Anyway, take
Plus,
care.
they need
We'll
money.
talk to you. Have a great holiday if I don't see you beforehand, and maybe I'll see you between the holidays, and then we'll see you after the holidays.
Yes, and if the opposite happens, great. That will be awesome too.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'm going to consult with the Joint Chiefs of Staff before we make any decisions.
I'm not. I'm just going to tweet.
I mean, I know
the
people
answer.
that don't do that, but I just thought I would.
I am more like Trump than I care to admit.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Okay. I just want to check in on this criminal justice reform thing and figure out exactly what the hell's going on, although I'm not sure exactly where to turn to get the best stuff on it, and I'm scanning around trying to figure out not so much what's in it as what is the state of play procedurally, to figure out whether this is I'm hoping maybe one of these quick summaries will let us know here. But I don't know, how quick is this summary? NBC News has this story: how Trump unexpectedly garnered bipartisan support for criminal justice reform. And, let's see. I mean, maybe the thing to do here is, my second thought was, well, why don't I just go over to Daily Kos and get our coverage of it? And, it's not nearly as easy to simply find that coverage with our iffy search terms over at Daily Kos as it is to scoop up bad coverage from wherever, NBC News, etc., and that's kind of a continuing problem. now that I think about it. And I should sit down for a big meeting with somebody over at Daily Kos and try and figure that out, except I have no coding answers for you. That's just not going to happen. I don't know how to tell you how to fix it. I can only complain about it. So I don't know whether that's of any interest to anybody. Let me see. How will I tell? I can't even tell whether it's been done. Or the only thing I can do, really, the most effective way of searching, if I'm not monitoring each front page publication of each story, is to scroll. And I don't know if that's really it's not an effective use of airtime. So as a result, I almost always default to news that can be found quickly by Googling, and our stuff doesn't come up. And there's like a built-in bias against like good, helpful, thoughtful, progressive ideas about what actually happened in the news. And we have the power to fix that focus, and I don't know if we're doing it. Or maybe somebody there actually knows how to do these searches more efficiently, and it's just me, and I don't know, and so I suffer. But no, I'm not seeing anything so far. So, and it may be that it just hasn't made it to the front page yet, although you would have thought maybe by yesterday afternoon it would have gotten there. And it's not for lack of people who have an interest in the subject. Maybe it's as much a commentary on the efficacy of this bill, because not a lot of high praise for it being super comprehensive. I guess we'll say that. All right. Well, I'm forced by events to turn to NBC News. How Trump unexpectedly garnered bipartisan support for criminal justice reform. It's interesting to think about how, what machinations did they have to go through to make him get credit for this? With the election of Donald Trump, advocates worried that they had missed their chance at criminal justice reform. They were wrong, says Leanne Caldwell over at NBC. And I have my doubts about whether this is a good call or not. Well, let's quickly read a bit of the story, and then we'll take our top of the hour break. It seems like an unbelievable story. For years, a bipartisan coalition of religious leaders, scholars, and activists have argued the criminal justice system puts far too many people behind bars and unfairly targets black men. This is true. And it does seem like an unbelievable story that religious leaders and a bipartisan coalition of them at that would agree, because we tend to think in terms of our religious leaders here in this country as right-wingers, although there's, of course, a vast religious conservative-ish left. I mean, they're left on social issues, but they're religiously conservative, I guess you could say. The coalition urged the Obama administration to adopt their recommendations for reform, yet Obama left office without passing legislation on criminal justice reform. That is because Obama is not a legislator. He is the president of the United States, and you misconstrue the whole thing. But whatever. Let's misconstrue it again and give Donald Trump credit for this. Instead, President Donald Trump, known for his harsh and not awfully, but it does say often, it's true that it's awfully, racially tinged, tough on crime rhetoric, so already in this, hedging territory. Well, you can't write an article about him passing criminal justice reform, which he didn't do, and call him racist. We'll have to say racially tinged, because something. You can't say he's a racist and pass criminal justice reform. That won't make any sense. So blah, blah, blah. Instead, President Donald Trump is poised to make criminal justice reform a reality. What's the date on this? It's today. So he's still just poised. After being passed in the Senate on Tuesday night, a broad criminal justice reform package is expected to pass the House on Thursday. That's today, before it heads to the president's desk to be signed into law. And the rare bipartisan consensus came directly as a result of White House involvement. So, long story short, what I came looking for is the House going to do it? And the summary answer is yes, But again, I mean, it may just be, look, we have an agreement. Let's do it by voice vote. Jump out of the way of the Senate. We don't know what's in the bill. We don't care. On the other hand, if there's a high absentee rate and there's lots of Freedom Caucus people around and they are, let's say, more racially tinged than even Donald Trump, I don't know. It's a question, I guess, of whether or not would they want to throw themselves in the path of what looks to be setting up like a victory for Donald Trump. And here's a question, just a purely political question. If it's disturbing you at all, it's bothering me a little bit, all this idea of giving credit to Donald Trump for this when everybody knows he's not a legislator. And although it's possible to lead legislation, to be sure, as President of the United States, we expect it of the President of the United States. We expect, though, I expect that of mentally competent presidents of the United States, people who are intellectual enough and powerful enough and understand the process enough and the substance enough to be intellectual leaders on the thing, to make a call for reform as opposed to simply saying, I'm here and you're here. Isn't it our time? So why don't you pass some checks, notes, criminal justice reform on our time? Right? I mean, I don't feel like he led anything. And at best, he handed it to Jared Kushner, which is not really, doing the work. But here's the question. Is it the opinion, is it the calculation of the Democrats in this bipartisan coalition, whatever it is, to say, listen, if we aren't solicitous of Donald Trump, he will change his mind and he'll veto this thing to own the libs. And or if we're not solicitous of it and get Donald Trump on board with it, then the Freedom Caucus and House Republican racists will oppose it and slow it down and kill the thing by not passing it before the end of this Congress. But if Donald Trump is on board, they won't dare. Is that what they're doing? That's a possibility. It would make a hell of a lot more sense than what we're actually seeing. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll figure out which direction we're going next, but I'm not finding much on the way. I guess we could take a look and see what the bill actually does. The Warlock seems fairly convinced that it didn't do all that much, and I don't understand how anybody could expect that it would. For all the excitement, if there was any. I mean, the article says, hey, we're excited. It was bipartisan. I'm a partisan. I'm one of the from one of the two parties that was part of this bipartisan thing. I don't know anything about it, and I don't feel excited about it, and I don't particularly care. But maybe I should. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's great things in it. Maybe there's some great things that would have made the bill even greater that didn't make it in there. That wouldn't be terribly surprising. Let me skim the rest of this thing. But I think that's a good thought that we had at the end, because it was mine. I love my thoughts. They're fantastic. I don't know. I was just pulling one out of a hat. Maybe Democrats are playing it this way. Look, it's an okay bill. It's not the greatest in the world, but to get a criminal justice reform bill passed and signed during the Trump administration is a pretty big deal. And I'm not going to break my arm patting myself on the back over it, but why get it vetoed or blocked in the House? I mean, what good does that do for anybody? So we'll be solicitous of it. Oh, Donald Trump did it. You passed criminal justice reform. You'll love the story, Donald. It's one of those things. Look, right here in the start, the setup tells you all you need to know in this NBC News thing. For years, a bipartisan coalition of blah, blah, blah. Who cares, right? It took years. It's been going on for a long time. Only I could get it done, right? The coalition was bipartisan, therefore equals good. We've been conditioned on this. It's not necessarily the case, but bipartisan. Oh, well, everyone wants bipartisanship. Religious leaders, they're good people. Never mind what we just learned something about another horrific raft of clergy protected from prosecution for child abuse in the Chicago area, was it? I mean, it's all over the world, but that was the last raft. Okay, so religious leaders, scholars, everybody likes scholars, even if they're What time was it? Was it the 3 o'clock scholars that were dollaring? I don't remember how the rhyme goes. Activists, we love them. They're fantastic, I guess. They've argued that criminal justice system puts far too many behind bars and unfairly targets black men. I'm surprised that you can get a bipartisan agreement on that, but I guess from time to time you can. So he loves the story. It's bipartisan. Religious leaders are in it. Scholars and activists are in it. And Obama couldn't get it done. I can. That's going to get him excited about signing the thing. That's just how it works. All right. So what's in it? Let's see. A rare bipartisan consensus came directly as a result of White House involvement. How do you like that? This account of how criminal justice reform came to pass is based on interviews with activists, White House, and congressional aides, some of whom requested anonymity to speak more freely, which makes zero sense, but that's what we do these days. Let's see. Dick Durbin is in here, longtime criminal justice reform activist. He put it this way. A breakthrough I'd never expect. The election of Donald Trump as president. What does that have to do with this? He brought his son-in-law to town. Awesome. There's a new son-in-law in town, everybody. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, made criminal justice reform a priority, he was told to, having seen the federal prison system firsthand after his father, real estate developer Charles Kushner, spent 14 months behind bars for tax evasion and illegal campaign contributions. What? Who even knew that that was a crime? He was, of course, behind bars for soliciting a prostitute to use to blackmail his brother-in-law. I guess that didn't rank mention. P.S. Are we just not going to talk about it because we want this thing to get passed and signed? It won't affect anything if I say it, right? Nobody's listening. Jared Kushner, fresh off of having his father incarcerated in the federal prison system for tax evasion and illegal campaign contributions, proceeds immediately to commit tax evasion and illegal campaign contribution crimes. Okay. I'm not really certain what he learned then from the whole incident. But anyway, the president's advisor, that's Kushner, believe it or not, wasn't ready to agree to what longtime advocates were proposing, because I was thinking more along the lines of me not going to jail or letting my dad out or whatever. And you were thinking about blah people, as Rick Santorum calls them. The coalition had long pushed for reforms that would include changes to mandatory minimum sentences, releasing people who serve disproportionately harsh sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, efforts to reduce recidivism and further reduce the sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine, 200 years into this lobbying effort. So those are things that the coalition wanted. Did they get them? Kushner argued strongly that such a comprehensive approach was likely not on the table. That's not even that comprehensive, but okay. Trump was firmly rooted in the issue Trump wasn't. I'm sorry. It's like, wait a minute. This sentence doesn't make sense. Trump was firmly rooted in the issue. He wasn't firmly rooted in the issue. I gotcha. Or any issue. And his first attorney general, Jeff Sessions, had a long history of opposing such efforts. Instead, Kushner pressed for a narrower bill that would, so what do we get in the bill? Prioritize prison reform. What does that mean? Specifically making education and mental health support more available to inmates to help prepare them for their release. It's a good thing. Sentencing reforms, particularly flexibility for nonviolent drug offenders, were likely too controversial and a bridge too far, Kushner said, according to sources. So nothing for the blah people. Even with slimmed down goals, the president was still an obstacle, as he is to everything. Last January, Trump held a meeting on prison reform in the Roosevelt Room with advocates who saw it as their last chance to get the president on board as they presented their statistics, facts, and arguments in favor of making changes to the system. The president seemed to lose interest. I think I know where this is going. If it doesn't get there, I'll be disappointed. In other words, serious advocates came to the White House, made a presentation on what is this all about. Oh, boring. Wait a minute, I have that somewhere.
Boring.
Right. Okay. So I'm falling asleep here. What do you got for me? Kim Kardashian. That's the answer. We'll send Kim Kardashian. Oh my God, I'm having my picture taken with Kim Kardashian. She thinks she's more famous than I am, but she's not. But I like to let her think. I like to let her think that because it's nice, right? You know, you have a guest come in, they want to be more famous than you. I'm used to this. It's okay. They're not, but it's okay. So I do it anyway. So she comes in, and now he's for criminal justice reform. That's what it took. Bring a model spokesperson, right? It's just his old real estate sales trick. I can't get you interested in $1 million condo. What about if this hot chick tells you about the $1 million condos? What if she goes with you to one of the condos and shows you what you could do there? Then you're interested in $1 million condo. Fine. Kim Kardashian. I wonder if it's even in here. I'll be curious to find out. I guess I better read. As they pretend to, okay, statistics, facts, and arguments, he loses interest. So Reed Cordish, then an aide to Kushner, interrupted the conversation. Mr. President, one of the most powerful things about your campaign and your message, it's strongly powerful, bigly, and your message is, as president, is you fight for the forgotten men and women, and there's no one more forgotten than these people, Cordish said, referring to prison inmates, because everybody in the room went, whoa, these people, what? Oh, I meant prison inmates. Okay. Trump briefly stared at Cordish. Click. You're right, he said, according to two people in the room who requested anonymity. We want to be anonymous because we don't want the president to be on the record saying someone else is right and then thereby joining the bandwagon and getting credit for it. I have to be anonymous about that. So, okay. So basically, here's what happens. I don't care. I don't give a crap. This is stupid.
Boring.
Mr. President, though, you're so strong. Remember how you were really strong about forgotten people in America, the forgotten men and women of America? These are them, and you're so strong for them. And it's great how strong you are now for them in this subject. You're right. I am bigly strong about that. A few days later, that's what it takes. I mean, that's why I'm wondering, whether this is the play here. Democrats at this point are like, if we don't say anything bad and he continues to enjoy getting good press for this, that will pass on a voice vote in the House. A few days later, at a congressional Republican retreat, Trump told lawmakers he believed prison reform was a critical issue that they needed to pass. It was then, advocates said, that they knew the legislation had a chance. And they're right. So when was this anyway? Last January? So January 2018, and then the retreat. And then it took them all friggin' year to get to where the House is gonna voice vote this thing. Did they do anything? 4 months later, in April, the House brought up a narrow prison reform bill that Trump had indicated he'd support, but did not include sentencing reform. He's cool with that. He'll just say it's huge. Republicans worried sentencing reform would scare off too many GOP colleagues, actually helping people, while a senior White House aide said it had purposely been made more narrow to keep Sessions from killing it. Sessions left the administration last month. That's possible. The bill got an important lift when New York Democratic Representative Hakeem Jeffries signed on as a co-sponsor, but I think we hate that now. Despite opposition from most Democrats wary of giving Trump a victory and who thought the legislation didn't go far enough. We may actually. Jeffries, a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, long considered a rising star in the Democratic Party, believed that a small advancement would be better than no advancement. Incrementalist. I guess that's true. Right? He called the bill the First Step Act for that reason. Facing pushback from liberals who argued the bill was too narrow, Jeffries released a 7-page memo countering their arguments, according to a person familiar with the situation. That memo was instrumental in keeping fellow Democrats and liberal groups from sabotaging the effort. Then, Jeffries and Van Jones, the advocacy group, Cut 50, hashtag Cut 50, technically, worked furiously to convince Democrats to support the measure. And I'm not opposed to the something's better than nothing approach on this. Elitists will say we should have held out for a perfect bill. While sitting in their ivory table, that's what it says, I quit. And this is a Democratic aide. Sitting in their ivory table. Now, if it really was an ivory table, would you be sitting in it? Not that I don't sit in ivory. Let me just tell you that right now. Now, you wouldn't sit in any kind of a table, no matter what it's made of. And it's a tower and, sorry. They will, elitists will say we should have held for a perfect bill or a perfect sentence. While sitting in their ivory table with their degrees, this guy has no degree, right? Then they will judge when these people who have paid their dues should be able to go home to their families, a Democratic aide said. We did the right thing. We don't care who the president is or who gets the credit. This was the right thing to do. I'm sympathetic with the argument. I just have a problem with ivory table, and it's not that big of a deal. Meanwhile, Georgia Representative Doug Collins, Jeffrey's Republican co-sponsor, was able to win the support of nearly every Republican in the House, specifically by keeping out sentencing reform. So that's where they are at the start. It was a matter of saying, here's the issues we're not going to be dealing with, which is some of the more controversial and expansive sentencing reforms, Collins told NBC News. So it sounds, Warlock, like you're kind of right. So the bill ended up passing the House 360 to 59 in May. Now, we started with this article with the presumption that the House hadn't done its work first. It did. It's just that, procedurally speaking, it sounds like the Senate changed the bill. And really, if they wanted this thing to sail through, the Senate simply should have accepted the House version of it. And it's created a problem that they've changed it. But that's the prerogative of the Senate. They changed it, and now the House has to approve it. And that's not at all hard to believe, that there could be voice vote approval for minor changes passed to great fanfare in the Senate to the First Step Act. Okay. The bill ended up passing the House in May, large margin, 360 to 59. The overwhelming vote was noteworthy, convincing advocates the legislation might have a chance of becoming law after all. That's a vote number. Can't be ignored. That can't be ignored. That's what it should say. I then thought it had a chance in the Senate, said Mark Holden, Vice President of Koch Industries, yes, and board member of the Koch-backed Americans for Prosperity. The group has been a part of the Bipartisan Reform Coalition, believe it or not, since discussions began in the Obama administration. And you heard a lot about that because the Kochs were super vocal about their support for this big Obama initiative, right? But the House bill still faced uncertainty in the Senate. Reform advocates of both parties who had been working on the issue for years wanted to add back the sentencing reforms that had scared off lawmakers in the House, including easing mandatory minimum sentencing rules that force judges to give low-level drug offenders decades in prison. That is a big deal. They also wanted to reduce and make retroactive sentences for crack cocaine possession, as many inmates serve sentences hundreds of times longer than those convicted of powder cocaine offenses. This is also true. At this point, Trump still wasn't on board with sentencing reforms. Enter, there she is, Kim Kardashian West, who may have single-handedly changed the president's mind. In scare quotes, I would put mind. West met with Trump at the White House in September to urge him to pardon Alice Marie Johnson, a grandmother who had received a life sentence in 1996 for a nonviolent first-time drug offense. A week later, Trump commuted Johnson's sentence, and she walked out of prison after 21 years. Now, I don't know whether she was really there for a pardon and got a commutation. They're different things. I don't know if that's something we should worry about. Getting her out of prison was obviously the top priority. A pardon would be nice because it has some additional legal effects. Commutation of the sentence is just, well, you were guilty and you stay guilty, but we'll let you out of prison, which is what you were after, I think, although sometimes people are after the whole enchilada, and Trump couldn't bring himself to do that. I don't know that you're not guilty, after all, cocaine, crack, whatever it is, but okay, that he's willing to let her out. I'll take it. Still, the First Step Act languished in the Senate. Lawmakers, including Republican Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, argued the House version was too weak. They wanted sentencing reform, too. Shortly after the midterms, Grassley and Durbin announced a deal with the White House to attach sentencing reform to the House bill. That's a good addition. A more comprehensive effort than anyone thought could get through Congress or win the support of the president. Then Trump held an event in November publicly supporting the newly crafted legislation, still subject to change, I guess. The Fraternal Order of Police also came out in support, giving their measure major momentum. That is big. On the other side of the issue sat Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton, a longtime opponent of almost any criminal justice legislation. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had refused to bring any criminal justice reform bill for a vote before the midterms, believing it would be too difficult a campaign issue for his members. Kushner had pressed McConnell to jam this in before the midterms, a White House official said, but McConnell asked Kushner to let it go until after. In return, the aide said McConnell promised to whip the vote. That's not an awful deal. McConnell told Kushner to finalize your language, shore up support, the official added. The Senate Majority Leader told Republican supporters in the Senate that he would only bring the vote on the bill to the floor if they could deliver at least 65 votes. Now, he said he was going to whip on it. And now he says, you got to whip on it. That's McConnell for you. Still, McConnell refused to prioritize the legislation, pointing instead to other priorities, including judicial nominations and funding the government. That's a big deal. Advocates insisted they had counted at least 70 votes in the Senate, but McConnell still refused to budge. Meanwhile, a leading law enforcement group, the National Sheriff's Association, was quietly working against the measure. So Trump began tweeting, pressuring McConnell to bring it to the floor. And here's one of those tweets embedded in the piece here. Hopefully Mitch McConnell will ask for a vote, all capital letters, on criminal justice reform, each of those words capitalized. It is extremely popular and has strong bipartisan support. It will help a lot of people save taxpayer dollars and keep our communities safe. Go for it, Mitch. Both sides continue to massage the bill to enhance support, which was enough to convince more Republicans to sign on, including Senators Ted Cruz, Tom Tillis, Steve Daines from Montana, and David Perdue from Georgia. At the same time, negotiations to fund the government were stalled, and Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake put a hold on all judicial nominations until he was given a vote on a bill to protect the special counsel. That left open more time on the Senate floor. That's a good play, too, making it difficult for McConnell to continue blocking the vote. I was wondering if anyone was going to mention that when they listed those two conditions. Ultimately, it passed by a margin of 87-12 on Tuesday night. This may be my proudest moment in 8 years in the Senate. Republican Utah Senator Mike Lee said, this bill died 1,000 deaths just in the last few months alone, so even though the ultimate vote was overwhelming and supported, there were 1,000 times we had to rescue it from the fire, so that makes it super gratifying. Grassley summed up the process to passage by referring to his fellow senators as marshmallows. What? How do you eat 10,000 marshmallows? One at a time, he said. That is a metaphor I was not expecting and don't think was particularly effective and has given me an entirely different impression of what Grassley is about. You know what senators are? They're marshmallows. Now I'm going to eat all of them. Okay. 10,000? That's not how many are in the Senate. It's 100. But, okay. Whatever, Grassley, crazy old coot. Fine. So that's the procedure that they went through. The House passed a narrow bill, which is bad, right? Because you wanted to have sentencing reform. That was almost the whole point of the whole thing. But you say, can't get it through the House because it's full of crazy, idiot Republican lunatics. Still is, but before the election, they're all still here. Narrow the bill, pass it without the stuff we really want, maybe knowing in the Senate there's more support, believe it or not, which is really not what would normally be your initial guess. More support for a broader bill. They'll pass it broader. That'll necessitate bringing it back to us. But if we can get the president on board because Kim Kardashian went to visit him or whatever, then one, with high rates of absenteeism in the lame duck session, and two, high rates of idiot Republicans who are actually going to show up to vote, basically doing whatever Trump asks them to do, we might actually get this thing done. But we have to put it through weak in the House first. Then the Senate will put the good stuff back in and then pass it back to the House. And then the familiar dynamics of House and Senate come back. This is a little weird. Usually a bill isn't broadened in the Senate. So that's the unusual part. But they're using the usual leverage, which is passing it back to the House at the end of the session, right before they recess, and saying, take it or leave it. You will either kill this bill or make it a reality. And the president wants it to be a reality. Take it or leave it. Accept our changes. Do it by voice vote if you want to. And then nobody has to cast a tough vote. And it gets passed. So it is possible they might actually finish this thing up. It's possible, too, that some sort of Republican turd in the punch bowl here in the House side will screw things up and come up with some racially tinged comment about why they don't want to do this thing after all. And the entire Freedom Caucus bolts, if they're even present in Washington. So this is a very, very interesting dynamic. Not always going to be replicable in every situation. It has a lot to do with timing, both end of the session, end of the Congress, and it being post-election, and being that it's right up against a recess that everybody wants to go home for. So, okay, I think we finally pulled some good stuff out of that and learned a little bit about what the chances are for the bill and how it got to where it got to. Not too bad. All right, let's see. Should I throw in a couple other things here? Should I throw in a couple of the comments here? Let's take a look at what people have been saying while we've been blabbing about this. Neil, Ideologue, one of my favorite handles on Twitter. Chuck Grassley had an onion tied to his belt when he gave that interview. I believe you may be right. Michael Musson commenting on, what are we talking about? Are we talking about Syria? Trump openly gives Russia what it wants. He has perfected the quid amateur quo. Not the pro quo, but the amateur quo. All right. Very good. Let's see. What else have we got here? Employee of the month. Yes. Thank you. And I still need to get to that article that you sent us. Warfare class. First Step Act deserves your skepticism. Okay. It started with S, and I was like, deserves your support? Are you trying to tell me something here? Criminal justice reform. Zach Cheney Rice wrote this for the Intelligencer section of the New York Magazine in 1989. Are we going to be able to get through this? I mean, it deserves airing now, right? Well, we won't be able to get through it before the next breaks. But, all right, let's do it. Let's do a compare and contrast. Is this written today? Yeah, I guess so. The publication just says 8:52 a.m. So I assume today at 8:52 a.m. Deserves my skepticism. Not hard. I'm looking at a picture of Cory Booker chatting with Chuck Grassley and Mike Lee before the press conference about the bill, and that stirs my skepticism all by itself. Let's start. In 1989, then Senator Joe Biden went on TV to criticize President George H.W. Bush's national drug control strategy. Bush was seeking to accelerate the war on drugs by pumping over $1 billion into narcotics-related law enforcement, expanding the resources available to prosecutors, jails, and prisons, and harshening punishments for drug dealers. Biden argued that the president was not going far enough, in case you forgot where we were in 1989. Quite frankly, the president's plan is not tough enough, bold enough, or imaginative enough to meet the crisis at hand, he said, responding to Bush's speech outlining the plan that September. It does not include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs, enough prosecutors to convict them, enough judges to sentence them, or enough prison cells to put them away for a long time. Nearly 30 years later, and, it should be noted, 30 years is a long time, Biden is an early frontrunner for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. His party on Tuesday voted unanimously to pass the First Step Act through the Senate, partnering with all but 12 Senate Republicans to secure the biggest changes to the federal criminal justice system in years. Not secured yet, but okay. The most vocal of the 12 holdouts was Senator Tom Cotton, who's a pretty big jackass, and by the way, will get me on board by taking the opposite side on just about anything. Let's see. The tough-on-crime Arkansan who has made a habit of opposing reform using language strikingly similar to Senator Biden's. Of course, he's 30 years behind the times in that, and Biden was wrong then. Anyway, if anything, we have an under-incarceration problem. Wow. Cotton said in a 2016 speech at the Hudson Institute earlier this month he castigated the First Step Act as criminal leniency legislation. What a great guy. We'll be back with more after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7. For which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you, but remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Are we ready to continue with this? I think we probably ought to. It's kind of interesting and a good reminder of where Biden was 30 years ago. Whether he's still there or not, I don't know. Will it matter to you? Is it a make or break proposition? Some people will be outraged. Others will not. Others won't care at all. I don't know. Let's see. Separated by 3 decades and a partisan gap that only seems to widen by the day, Senators Biden and Cotton, I mean, separated by 3 decades is pretty important here, nevertheless illustrate how interchangeable Democrats and Republicans have traditionally been on criminal justice policy when they were not busy one-upping each other to prove who could be more punitive. The parties have built strong bipartisan alliances atop the shared goal of locking people in cages, especially black people. Well, this is true. The direction of this bipartisanship temporarily reversed this week with the First Step Act vote. Instead of worsening America's mass incarceration crisis, senators opted to make the experience of federal prison slightly less painful for inmates, shortening mandatory minimum sentences for some crimes and strengthening avenues for some incarcerated people to abbreviate their prison stints. But after decades spent normalizing the existence of the world's largest concentration of prisoners, the Overton window regarding what substantive change in the United States actually looks like has shifted so far that even modest changes seem bold and ambitious. And even that assessment is generous. The jubilation and back-patting that has greeted Tuesday's Senate vote better reflects relief that inter-party consensus is possible under President Donald Trump than the bill's actual scope and impact. All right, interesting. The limitations of the First Step Act are obvious on even a cursory glance, and I will curse all through this cursory glance. The American federal prison and jail populations, which the bill addresses, constitute a combined 10% of the country's total incarcerated population, the bulk of which is housed in local jails and especially state prisons. That means just a fragment of the nation's 181,000 federal inmates would be eligible for the bill's already modest provisions. For example, the broader use of halfway houses and home confinement as alternatives to correctional facilities, and the availability of work and education programs inmates can enroll in to earn time credits toward early release. I don't know if it's necessarily fair to blame federal legislators for dealing only with the federal prison population, but I guess if you want to, you could do that, but then you could certainly say, well, it's meant to serve as a model for state-level reform later on. And it's not ordinarily the way things move, but if you get support for reform among federal legislators, take it, I guess. Anyway, the lives of the roughly 2 million prisoners locked up locally or at the state level will go unaltered, unless, of course, the federal government has some influence on states. Even some of the bill's more galvanizing provisions, though undeniably meaningful for the several thousand men and women they would affect, are more akin to making good on already existing policy than dramatic overhauls. The punishment disparities for crimes involving crack and powder cocaine that the First Step Act addresses had already been narrowed with the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010, though Tuesday's bill would make its provisions retroactive. The bill also bans the shackling of pregnant inmates, which has been banned for a decade since 2008. Okay, I don't mind doubling up on that one, but all right. These are not meaningless steps, to be sure, but the bill's reach is inconsistent with the celebration that has greeted its passage in the Senate. The hero image of the New York Times story on the subject shows Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey embracing Chuck Grassley, the Iowa Republican who played his party's most dogged role in advancing the bill through Congress. This is literally one of the reasons I came to the United States Senate, to get something like this done, Booker said, according to the Times. This is the biggest thing, Grassley said after the vote, except maybe getting a Supreme Court justice, which is, of course, bigger and more annoying, and you stole one of those. Today's reform ideas gained traction in the Obama era, when a spate of police killings invigorated a national debate about criminal justice system's excesses. The African-American community got more insistent in its claims, and the Republicans got more reasonable in their own critique and set of concerns about criminal justice. Activist and former Obama advisor Van Jones told The Guardian that it took years of wrangling and negotiation to secure a compromised echo of an already modest reform bill Republicans killed in 2016, bodes poorly for the future of improvements, which many senators already acknowledge are necessary. The First Step Act takes modest but important steps first ones, as a matter of fact, to remedy some of the most troubling injustices within our sentencing laws and our prison system. Democratic Senator Pat Leahy of Vermont said, according to the Washington Post, "It's my hope that this bill represents not just a single piece of legislation, but a turning point in how Congress views its role in advancing criminal justice." Indeed, the First Step Act is seen by many as just that, step one towards what reformers hope are more sweeping overhauls to come. But no second step is promised, and the traits that make the bill seem like a political no-brainer, namely that so many senators seem to agree about its necessity across party lines, are also traits that invite skepticism regarding its impact and durability. Revolution is not fomented in the gap between Ted Cruz and Joe Manchin on the ideology spectrum. The overhauls needed to actually reverse American mass incarceration are far less broadly palatable than what the current bill proposes. The Act's provisions and corresponding rhetoric reserve most of their generosity for drug offenders, many of them nonviolent, who constitute almost half of the federal prison population. But limiting leniency to people convicted of nonviolent crimes, unless you, like Tom Cotton, believe that selling cocaine is a violent crime, does nothing for the 54% of state inmates who are incarcerated for acts of violence. I don't know how big the constituency is for moderating the sentences of violent offenders, but okay. Solving a 2.2 million person problem is impossible if you view nearly 1 million of them as untouchable, especially when even officials who backed the bill deny more significant changes to the system are needed. I don't think our justice system is fundamentally broken, unjust, or corrupt. First Step Act co-sponsor and Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah wrote for the National Review in November, "I know from experience that dangerous criminals exist, individuals who are capable of or uninterested in rehabilitation and change." This article doesn't have any Jared Kushner in it, interestingly enough. Considering how joyously the bill's passage was received on Capitol Hill this week, Lee's insinuation that fundamental change is unnecessary may seem a minor smudge on an otherwise triumphal narrative. In reality, it lays bare what a fragile foundation the First Step Act actually rests on. Partisan rancor made its passage seem unlikely, but the same fears, biases, and political considerations that rendered it relatively toothless threatened to undermine whatever incremental gains are secured. The American electorate is far from immune to strongman politics or fear-mongering around crime. The election of Donald Trump confirmed that. Law and order crackdowns have historically transcended partisan differences, uniting presidential administrations from Lyndon Johnson's to Ronald Reagan's and Bill Clinton's. The trip from Joe Biden to Tom Cotton is perilously short. It only takes one crisis or shift in public opinion to drive America back into mass incarceration's heyday. That's an interesting look at that. I am glad that we were able to add it to the mix. So, mixed reviews, mixed results from the bill itself, though all indications are that the House will jump out of the way of it and we'll get a good up-close look at how it gets implemented pretty soon. Very interesting. So there's an awful lot, I guess, to consider just around that bill. A couple other suggestions for things to jump in on. We're going to probably save a lot of the bigger stuff for Friday. But there's a lot of things to have to put on the record here, and I'm not sure how we're going to deal with it all at once. Let's see. I'm going to jump around a little bit here. There's a couple of things that we need to get on the record and consider. One, let's just jump over here. Public integrity has this piece. Not super important in the grand scheme of things, but well worth noting. And not super long either. Wilbur Ross. Remember him? He's the Commerce Secretary. By the way, big article, very interesting article on the epidemic of lung disease among coal miners, and it's killing Trump's constituency, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even take note of I saw the publication, and I guess we can scroll back in the tweet stream and find it, but Wilbur Ross came up, of course. You guys decided you wanted to make the owner of the Sago mine into the Secretary of Commerce. It's not really surprising that you're not getting any help with your lung disease from the United States government. Anyway, that's not what Wilbur Ross is in the news for right here, right now. Wilbur Ross said he divested a stock holding, but he didn't. The Center for Public Integrity tells us, and this is, of course, another episode of How to Read a Trumpster Comment. Yeah, I divested. No, you didn't. Correct. That's exactly how it should be read. Carrie Levine put this piece together for the Center for Public Integrity. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, twice, in fact, submitted sworn statements to ethics officials saying he had divested stock that he, in fact, still owned. A new document obtained by the Center for Public Integrity reveals the disclosure in a new filing by Ross, he's the one telling everybody this, represents the latest in a series of inaccurate statements and omissions in Ross's personal financial statements since President Donald Trump tapped him as Commerce Secretary in late 2016. Ross was supposed to sell his Bank United Incorporated stock, valued at up to $15,000, not a whole lot, within 90 days of his Senate confirmation, according to his federal ethics agreement. In other words, by the end of May 2017. By the way, $15,000 worth of stock in anything is a lot of money for you and me, but not for Mr. Billionaire wearing slippers to the office. Ross twice submitted disclosure reports to federal ethics officials saying he had divested the stock, once in a transaction report from May 2017 and another time in his annual financial disclosure from August of 2018. But in October, Ross filed another transaction report with the ethics officials acknowledging he had not divested in the Bank United stock when he had said he did, and he in fact continued to own it until October 1st, 2018. And I guess I would add here, given the track record, maybe he still owns it after all. The Office of Government Ethics has not yet certified this latest transaction report, but released the document in response to a request for the Center for Public Integrity. Ross acknowledged he had previously reported selling the stock and said he had done so, quote, based on the mistaken belief that the agent executed my sell order on that date, unquote. In both previous reports, Ross certified that the statements I have made on this form are true, complete, and correct to the best of my knowledge. In a brief statement emailed in response to questions from Center for Public Integrity, Ross said the October transaction reported corrected an earlier filing and reiterated that he had believed the shares were sold on May 31st, 2017, when he originally reported divesting them. The Bank United stock compromises a tiny fraction of the wealthy Ross's assets, but it is the latest example of Ross failing to divest something that he said he had sold. He had previously failed to sell his Invesco Limited stock, valued at between $10 million and $50 million, a little more at stake there, until December 2017, even though in November 2017 he had told federal ethics officials he had complied with his ethics agreement and divested everything he had been required to divest. In July, the Center for Public Integrity reported the stock's value increased by between $1.2 million and $6 million over its value at the end of May, depending on Ross's actual number of shares. Ross had also previously reported late divestitures of stock in Sun Bank Corp. Incorporated, the Greenbrier Companies Incorporated, and Air Lease Corporation. In all cases, he said he had been unaware that he still owned the stock and moved to divest it when he found out. He has also faced other questions about his handling of potential conflicts of interest. In July, the acting head of the Office of Government Ethics, David Apol, A-P-O-L, I don't know, sent Ross an unusually blistering letter about his disclosure problems. Apol wrote that Ross's failure to divest assets by the deadline in his federal ethics agreement created the potential for a serious criminal violation on your part and undermined public confidence. Apol urged Ross to devote the resources necessary to ensure that the report he was required to file in August and all future reports are complete and accurate. That'd be nice. In response to that letter, Ross issued a statement saying he took his ethics obligation seriously and his errors had been inadvertent over and over again. The Senate confirmed a new director to the Office of Government Ethics, Emery Rounds, in July. OGE did not respond to a request for comment about whether it would take additional steps regarding Ross's compliance with his ethics agreement or why it had not yet certified and released Ross's most recent transactions report. Ethics watchdog said Ross no longer deserves the benefit of the doubt. You think? This is the latest in the series of omissions and claimed mistakes that have begun to add up to something that looks very suspicious, said Austin Evers, executive director of American Oversight, a nonprofit watchdog group. Wilbur Ross clearly is not taking his ethics obligation seriously. He's been warned, and at this point, he needs a full audit by OGE and probably Congress to make sure he's not operating with blatant conflicts of interest. Delaney Marsco, ethics counsel for the Campaign Legal Center, a nonprofit watchdog group that has called for the Commerce Department's Inspector General to investigate whether Ross violated conflict of interest laws and statutes governing false statements and omissions, said Ross's mistakes defy logic. There are rules in place, she said, adding that if he had followed OGE's instructions to carefully vet his August financial disclosure, he would have realized sooner than October that the stock hadn't been sold. It shows a lack of reverence towards the ethics program and a disregard for the rules, she said. Members of Congress have also repeatedly called for investigations into Ross's handling of his personal finances. Senator Ron Wyden, ranking member of the Finance Committee, has asked the Department of Justice to investigate. John Thune has asked the Commerce Inspector General to examine whether Ross violated conflict of interest laws as well. So he and Delaney Marsco, on the same page there. All right. Just of interest, I thought I would add that. Keep one eye on Wilbur Ross. It's always worth doing. Let's see. Let me scroll back and find that article that I mentioned, just at the very least so I could provide it to you to examine on your own. But I'm pretty sure that came yesterday afternoon at some point. All right. Not as easy to find. There it is. But here's the piece I was thinking of. An epidemic is killing thousands of coal miners. Regulators could have stopped it. It's an NPR story from All Things Considered, as a matter of fact. But extensive write-up of all this. And unfortunately, the Sago mine owner, maybe not. I don't know that it was necessarily a Department of Commerce job to deal with this particular epidemic of lung disease among miners. But You weren't going to have any potential alliances there from commerce on that score. But, maybe that was what the coal miners wanted. More delays on treating their disease and the continued death of their industry. It's possible. All right. Another important story that we haven't yet gotten to, but we'll see whether I can read the whole thing today because it's in the Wall Street Journal. But it was one of those stories that they thought was important, and so they released the entirety of the text, at least briefly. But not this morning. This morning they've locked it back up again, and I'll have to read it from the pocket version, and I think I can do that. Trump's attorney general pick criticized an aspect of Mueller probe in memo to Justice Department, according to, allegedly, Sadie Gurman of the Wall Street Journal. Also, there's this co-author in here that I only see by opening the real version, Aruna Viswanatha, or Viswanatha, perhaps, a better pronunciation. Anyway, I'm sure she'll call me and tell me I got it wrong, and that's okay. I believe you. William Barr is, of course, the person, if you forgot, who's been nominated to take up the mantle of the Justice Department on a permanent basis, even as maybe sort of kind of possibly purportedly acting AG Matthew Whitaker is the one behind the bump stock thing. And the gun people will have to figure out who to sue on that one. William Barr said the obstruction of justice inquiry by the special counsel is, quote, fatally misconceived. So that will create some pressure for yet another attorney general to recuse himself from leading or touching on this investigation. And perhaps in a fairer world, they might actually get it. But I don't know whether they're going to get that concession out of Trump or Barr on this one. And I don't know if it's necessarily strictly required. The fact that he has had an opinion on it. I mean, Sessions had recused himself from the investigation because it was an investigation of what Russian influence, what impact it had on the election. And Sessions was a key member of the campaign team. Barr was not. The fact that he had an opinion about how the Mueller probe was going to be conducted, I'm not certain is such a terrible thing, although it's interesting that they, for Attorney General nominees, are basically adopting the stance that the Department of Justice has counseled judicial nominees to take on these things. You can have had no opinion on matters that might come before the court. And I think that's ludicrous, and everybody knows that it's a pose. And now we're going to ask the attorney, I don't want him to be confirmed, I guess, probably. I don't know whether there's nobody better likely to be nominated anytime soon by Donald Trump. But that doesn't necessarily mean I would support his confirmation. Okay, let me take a look at the story here. It's William Barr, President Trump's choice for Attorney General, sent an unsolicited memo earlier this year to the Justice Department that excoriated Special Counsel Robert Mueller's inquiry into potential obstruction of justice by Mr. Trump, saying it is based on a fatally misconceived theory that would cause lasting damage to the presidency and the executive branch. A 20-page document, unsolicited, which was reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, provides the first in-depth look at Mr. Barr's views on the special counsel's Russia investigation, which he would likely oversee if confirmed. In the memo, Mr. Barr wrote that he sent it as a former official who hoped his views may be useful. He wrote he was concerned about the part of Mr. Mueller's probe that, according to news reports in the Journal and elsewhere, has explored whether Mr. Trump obstructed justice in asking then FBI Director James Comey to drop an investigation into former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn's contacts with Russia, and by later firing Mr. Comey. Mr. Barr's memo, dated June 8th and sent to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, argues that based on the facts as he understands them, the president was acting well within his executive branch authority. It's an interesting theory. Mr. Mueller has never fully confirmed the full scope of his investigation. Its primary focus is alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election and whether there were any links between Moscow and the Trump campaign. Mr. Barr's reasoning is likely to be closely scrutinized in confirmation hearings before the Senate, where Democrats and some Republicans have already promised to press him on how he would handle the Russia investigation, as well as on his expansive views of executive power. When Mr. Barr was selected, White House officials said they believed he would be easily approved by a GOP-controlled Senate. He's expected to be formally nominated early next month. Once again, the paperwork hasn't actually shown up, with a hearing shortly after. The White House had no comment Wednesday on Mr. Barr's memo. Mr. Barr wrote in the memo that he is, quote, in the dark about many facts, unquote, regarding Mr. Mueller's inquiry, and his analysis appeared to be based largely on public accounts. As I understand it, he writes, his theory, that is Mueller's, is premised on a novel and legally insupportable reading of the law. Moreover, in my view, if credited by the Justice Department, it would have grave consequences far beyond the immediate confines of this case and would do lasting damage to the presidency, that's okay, and to the administration of law within the executive branch. Mr. Barr's memo is peppered with strongly worded phrases about the peril he sees in Mr. Mueller's reading of the law as he understood it. He described Mr. Mueller's approach as grossly irresponsible, with potentially disastrous implications for the executive branch. He also wrote Mueller should not be permitted to demand that the president submit to interrogation about alleged obstruction. Mr. Barr declined to comment for this article through Justice Department spokeswoman Kerry Kupich, who added that Mr. Barr offered his views on his own initiative. Mr. Barr's arguments are consistent with a view expressed by some legal analysts that a president cannot be accused of obstruction if he is carrying out his duties as authorized by the Constitution. Others contend that if a president attempts to derail a lawful investigation for improper reasons, that amounts to obstruction of justice. The Barr memo cites previous legal analyses from both Democratic and Republican administrations. Mr. Barr served as Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. At the time he submitted the memo, he was a lawyer in private practice in Washington. Former officials occasionally provide unprompted input on legal matters to the Justice Department, according to people familiar with the matter. Mr. Barr argued in the memo that a president can be accused of obstructing justice under the relevant legal provision if he knowingly destroyed evidence or encouraged a witness to lie. But Mr. Trump was lawfully exercising his authority in firing Mr. Comey, he wrote. If prosecutors pursue Mr. Trump over his comments to Mr. Comey about Mr. Flynn, according to the memo, it opens the door for every decision that is alleged to be improperly motivated to be investigated as potential criminal obstruction. I know you will agree that if a DOJ investigation is going to take down a democratically elected president, it's imperative to the health of our system and to our national cohesion that any claim of wrongdoing is solidly based on evidence of a real crime, not a debatable one. Mr. Barr wrote in the memo, it's time to travel well-worn paths, not veer into novel, unsettled, or contested areas of the law, and not to indulge the fancies by overly zealous prosecutors. Mr. Trump's lawyers, why can't we make this thing silent? There's no way to keep this thing quiet. I've tried everything. All right. Mr. Trump's lawyers, after extensive negotiations with the special counsel, submitted written answers last month to questions on Russia's alleged interference in the election and whether the Trump campaign was involved in that effort. Trump has denied any collusion. We all know about that. Mr. Mueller's prosecutors had earlier told the Trump legal team that they had dozens of questions for the president, including those focused on the circumstances of Comey's firing, Flynn's departure as national security advisor, and any potential pardon of Mr. Flynn, who last year pleaded guilty to one count of lying to the FBI and whose sentencing was unexpectedly delayed on Tuesday. Yes, we all remember that. Mr. Trump's lawyer sent a letter to Mr. Mueller arguing that the president couldn't be compelled to testify and asserting Mr. Trump's actions couldn't be considered obstruction because the president was exercising his lawful powers. Interesting. We won't be able to get through all of the rest of it here. But, you know, I guess I'm just not seeing exactly what his actual argument is. except that it's within the power, legally speaking, of the president to fire an attorney general, which is true, though it doesn't. There's nothing that prevents anybody from looking into whether or not it was done with cause. And of course, when it's in the middle of an investigation into his own activities, I mean, does he not address that? He must. In 20 pages, he's got to get to more of that. But anyway, it's out there. It's hanging out there. Tomorrow's Friday. We'll have more time to examine some of these things, including Matt Fuller's fun article and a few other things that you guys have suggested that we still haven't gotten to. But for now, the things we haven't gotten to fall to the responsibility of Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see how many of them already are on the list. Let's see. The next logical step in light of all the evidence known so far would be for the Mueller team, back in the news, to link up the RNC Ukraine platform change with a quid pro quo and then indict the Trump campaign. Oh, and Jennifer Rubin is out there arguing for the indictment of the Trump organization. How fun.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Hey, speaking of the administration of justice, Oklahoma cops take $149,000 from a black Atlanta DJ and throw him in jail for not using his turn signal a full 100 feet before changing lanes, as we all often do. There's a lot more, of course. I'm not going to be able to cram it in, but justice will. That's what he does. Next.